Manchester City have just been humiliated by Norwegian side Bodo Glimt in the Champions League, being beaten by 3-1. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at why. We're going to be breaking down why City's tactical setup failed so spectacularly against the Norwegian side, how Bodo Glimt managed to expose City time after time again, and we're going to be highlighting the big mistake that Pep Guardiola made that led to this terrible result. The more details you hear about this, the worse it gets. Bodo Glimt's season actually ended in November and didn't restart until March. So essentially, for their domestic competitions, this is a pre-season friendly. And when I tell you that their last competitive outing was in the Champions League in mid-December, it's not a great look for City. So why did it go so spectacularly wrong? To best understand that, we need to understand how City wanted to set up from a tactical perspective. And to understand that, we need to harken back to what they did so wrong against Manchester United, or more on what they failed to do. And what they failed to do was find players in between the lines of United's 4-4-2, a similar defensive structure to what we have here with Bodo Glimt. To fix this, Pep Guardiola inserted both of his wingers in Foden and Shirky to inside forward positions closer to Erling Haaland. The wide play would then be used with Nico O'Reilly and Ryan Ait-Nouri. So he had width, he had players in between the pockets, and that left City's midfield three of Reinders, Rodri and Lewis. In having those players sit a little bit deeper, in looking to really progress and recycle the ball, they had essentially two separate banks of three. And it looked something like this. You had three players that would look to really recycle possession and push it through. And you had three players in Foden, Haaland and Shirky in those inside channels, in those inside positions to look to create those dynamic opportunities through their very good movement, the width being held by City's really high aggressive fullbacks. But this had a knock-on effect for the amount of work that both of City's centre-backs would have if they were to turn over possession and if they were to lose possession, because Bodo Glimt would then have more counter-attacking opportunities. Obviously, Guardiola banks on the fact that City are going to retain the ball and make sure that they don't give it away cheaply. But Bodo Glimt's structure meant that City weren't able to find those inside players without a lot of pressure being placed on them almost immediately. And it meant that due to that really good defensive shape, the ball got turned over, and it meant that City had to do a lot of defensive work, and you can have a good example of that right here. Look at how narrow Bodo Glimt are, look at how compact they are. There was no space to be given to those inside forwards and no real way of penetrating through that Bodo Glimt unit. In fact, there was a lot of space out wide, but that was covered by the really high pressing work rate from both of Bodo Glimt's fullbacks. And then once the ball got turned over, it was then a question of how well City would recover from a defensive point of view. And it would be fine if these five midfielders that they had on the inside of the pitch would be able to recover possession as quickly as they lost it, but that wasn't the case. And their recovery runs were nowhere near good enough, which led to a couple of problems. And this is exactly where Bodo Glimt's second goal against City comes from. Look at how compact they are, look at how narrow they are. This forces the centre-back to play it out wide. And this is almost exactly what Bodo Glimt want. They want to then go and contest that a little bit later. They want the centre of the pitch to be as congested as possible. And that's exactly what happens. They can't get the ball into Shirky or Foden, which means Rodri needs to come forwards. He gets baited forwards into this space to try and help overload the Bodo Glimt players. So as he moves forwards, he's now running into a cul-de-sac. He has nowhere really to go, and he relinquishes possession. Now just take note, if we go back once, if we take note of the two City centre-backs, they are the deepest players for Man City here, and they are halfway into the Bodo Glimt half. It is crazy the amount of space that they're being asked to cover. Look at where the fullbacks are. You've got Ait-Nouri on that close side. You've got O'Reilly on that far side. It's crazy. That's your back four. Madness. So when the ball inevitably does get turned over because there isn't any space there, the Bodo Glimt players kick the ball forwards, and then it's about recovery. Then it's about how will your players react? What is the reaction to giving the ball away? And from City's perspective, it's nowhere near good enough. From Bodo Glimt, it's absolutely sensational. And I don't want to take anything away from them because I thought they were brilliant. But they lose the duel City do, and it means that Bodo Glimt now have a 3v2. Remember, the only two centre-backs that were looking to be defensive for City, they are now being overwhelmed. The ball gets played across, and look at the amount of time and space he has to pick a shot. It is incredible, but it's down to the work rate that City have to go backwards, or the lack thereof, and their tactical positioning from the off. The real issue that City have that compounds these problems from a tactical point of view are the profiles of players that they have in certain positions, and more to the point, how they react to a negative scenario developing. Take this for example. This is the build-up to Bodo Glimt's first goal. Erling Haaland looks like he's going to get the ball, but it gets intercepted. That can happen. It gets kicked back the other way, and now it's about Bodo Glimt capitalising on a moment. The moment that I'm talking about is the 50-50 duel that Man City lose. But look at the reaction of the players around the player that loses the ball. Look at the player's reaction to their teammate being in a negative situation and how they respond to it. So Bodo Glimt go back the other way and they capitalise on that momentum. It's essentially a 2v1 here because Aït-Nouri is just too far away from the play. He can't affect it currently. So it's about how these City players look to respond. They do a decent job initially of stifling that Bodo Glimt progression, even though they've entered the penalty area. It's about stopping the cross. It's about making sure that you are marking the opposition players, and that's what City don't do. No player here is switched on to the potential danger that could unfold. So even if the cross does get played in, you've got a City player marking them. That doesn't happen here. So as the ball gets whipped in, it's about to get crossed in right here. As you can see, the number 9 for Bodo Glimt is completely unmarked. No player is aware whatsoever that he exists, and that cannot happen in any level. It is schoolboy stuff. It's a schoolboy error, and it gives Bodo Glimt their first goal. A huge, huge goal for them, but it is woeful from City. It's only once you start to expand the makeup of what City are and what they've become now that you really start to understand the real problems that they're facing, especially when it comes to being out of possession and not having the ball. And it really becomes more of a profile issue and more of an individualistic issue due to the fact that City's team fundamentals out of possession have been lost. They don't win the ball back high. They don't counter press aggressively. They really look to react to what a team is doing rather than be proactive in winning the ball back. And that's fine if you have the profile of players that allow you to play that way. So if we were to characterise this City side that played against Bodo Glimt in terms of whether they're a more attacking player or whether they're more a defensive player, it starts to become quite alarming once I show you this. If green is defensive and they're a little bit more scanning, a little bit more defensively orientated, red is obviously a little bit more attacking, and then you've got in between. I think O'Reilly is a bit of both. I think Lewis, while that could be the other question mark, I think he is a little bit more attacking, but that's quite the overwhelming amount of attacking players in what could be a defensively exposed side. And this is where we start to talk about Pep and the idea of his tactical approach and whether his team selection, I understand they have injuries, but whether his team selection in conjunction with his tactical setup is the correct play. And in this particular instance, I think he got it wrong, and I think this is the big mistake that he made going into this game. And when we start to move these players forwards into the tactical positions that we know that they played, it really does become quite alarming. So you have that defensive setup. You've got that makeup with Rodri, Kuznov and Alain. And when you go and look at the attacking phases of play, it's just a little bit overwhelming, and you're asking so much of your defensive players. And it's only once you really start to break it down that you might need a different tactical approach when it comes to dealing with all of these injuries and the lack of these profiles that they require to make them a balanced side. At the moment, City simply are not balanced. Pep looked to change things in the second half to give themselves a little bit more defensive flexibility while also maintaining that threat going back the other way. In having Ryan Aït-Nouri invert into midfield with Lewis pushing forwards and Ryan Desert on that left attacking midfield slot, City had something of a midfield attacking three. With Foden and Shirky holding the width now instead of those fullbacks, it allowed for one of the fullbacks in O'Reilly to maintain that three at the back with Alain and Kusanov. This meant that Rodri joined them, essentially creating a 3-1 rest defence, allowing for a little bit more defensive cover while also committing players forwards to try and get a goal back. There was a problem with this though, and that was the amount of work that Rodri would inevitably have to do and the amount of players that he would need to cover and the amount of space that he would need to cover generally. It looked something like this, and here you've got a really good example. You've got them progressing the ball forwards, but look at that split between the defensive unit and their offensive unit, and then you've got Rodri essentially slap bang in the middle there. Look at the amount of players that are covering him. Not only are you stopping a passing lane going into him, but you're also not really giving him an option to try and stop any kind of attacking progression that Bodo Glimt might have. So it's unsurprising with the amount of overwhelming pressure that he had that inevitably he got himself sent off due to the amount of work that he needed to cover. It was one of the major mistakes that I think Pep made in this game, a real big one. It was that isolation that ultimately led to Bodo Glimt's third goal, albeit it was a fantastic strike, but it came from the real isolation of Rodri in the centre of this midfield. He's got the ball currently and he's looking to progress forwards. The ball gets intercepted and then Bodo Glimt look to capitalise. Look at where Rodri is though next to the referee. Yes, you have 4 defenders back for City, but at the same time, you've got so many players that Rodri has to try and cover. It's just imbalanced. And then when they progress forwards, look at the difference here. It is incredible. You've got the attacking side, the defensive side, and then you've got Rodri in the middle trying to do a little bit of everything, trying to meld this team together. Unfortunately, he cannot. And it's this 1v1 battle that he loses to then give the player the ability to drive towards the box and obviously smash it into the top right-hand corner. It's a sensational finish, and Bodo Glimt thoroughly deserved this emphatic victory. But City really did help them at times. They were so very unbalanced. City obviously get a goal back, but they ultimately lose the game by 3-1, and that's because of the way they were so overexposed time after time again. So what could have changed? Well, initially, I'd look towards the positions of certain players in this setup. If we have to assume that the players picked by Pep Guardiola are the only players available, I still think there are quite a few changes that could be made to City's tactical setup that could have given them a couple of better results in these recent games. Initially, I'd look towards O'Reilly, Aït-Nouri and Lewis. While they all play fullback to a certain extent, I feel like they're being misused in certain positions. I'd move Aït-Nouri over to the left-hand side, O'Reilly in midfield to partner with Rodri to give that bit more defensive flexibility, and Lewis at right back where he's normally positioned to look to go down that right-hand side. When looking to go forwards, you still want to maintain that pressure, which means that Aït-Nouri moving forwards, allowing Foden to move in field, still gives you an overload in the centre of the park. You're still finding those passing lanes. And if you don't, you've got a good amount of movement from Foden in between that defensive line. But it gives you that 3-2 rest defence, which is so very important, I think, especially for maintaining that defensive nature that City so desperately crave. And then when you look towards that right-hand side, if you want to switch it round, Aït-Nouri can drop into the back 3, Lewis can come forwards, and the same can happen for Shirky. It gives a better balance to the City side. 5 defensive-sided players, 5 attacking-sided players, at least with the way that they're profiled in this tactical setup. And then when you think about overcommitting forwards, if you need a goal, you can push Aït-Nouri into midfield to be part of that attacking midfield 3. You've still got a 2-2 rest defence, but also at the same time, if you have O'Reilly on that left-hand side, you've also got the ability for him to drop into something of a left-back role because that's where he's suited. And that means that they've just got a bit more balanced defensive cover out on that left-hand side. Kusanov has the pace to deal with that right-hand side. It just gives a little bit better balance, in my opinion. And I think it's something that could have really helped Man City, especially in this game. But of course, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. What differences or what changes would you have made to help City get the win? And what do you make of their poor couple of games that they've had? Can they turn it around? What is next for this City side? Let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear from you, so please do get involved. Thank you ever so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learnt something new, and hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.